Hey everybody, it's Peter, and this one's going to be a fun one. In this video, I'm going to review the Z900 and the Versys 1000. And for some riders, this actually may be an alternative to something like that. But we're really going to talk about value. So regardless of what motorcycle you're looking at, we're going to talk about how to determine which value matters the most to you, because both of these are great values within their class, but this one is almost $10,000 less expensive than that one, even though they have fairly similar engines and fairly similar power numbers. So we're going to talk about how you can look at a motorcycle, decide what you want, instead of just deciding what other people tell you you should want. So I'm hoping this video will help you whether you're interested in these bikes or whether you're interested in other bikes, but I think it'll also definitely help you if you are interested in these bikes, because I will be using these bikes as review bikes to help you kind of learn to look at a motorcycle and learn to decide what kind of things you want and how to get the best value for you. So I'm outside today filming at Jim Gilbert's Wheels and Deals. They've got some dirt bikes in where I normally film. It's a pretty nice day, but it is nice and cloudy. So I've got these underneath the canopy here at Jim Gilbert's Wheels and Deals. This is the #1 volume Kawasaki dealer in the country. So if you want to check out these bikes, make sure you swing down to Fredericton, New Brunswick and come check out Jim Gilbert's Power Sports, where you can see these bikes and a massive showroom all the way down, all the way around the whole building to see all these vehicles. But let's get going with this review. So when most people think of value, they're thinking about price and value over time. And of course, value should be more than that. If you're shopping for a motorcycle and you want to get the best value, what you want to do is figure out what you want. Because for a lot of people, this bike might be a better value than that bike simply because you want something with good power, 4-cylinder engine, good technology, fairly upright seating position, and something that you can ride smoothly all day. This one still fits that, where that one may not. So when we talk about value, we're going to talk about what to look for in a bike and the things that matter to you, not the things that matter to other people. For instance, for me, I bought the Z900 RS, the retro sport version of this exact bike. It costs more, it makes less power, it has less technology, but for me, it was the right value. And again, it comes down to understanding what matters to you, not what matters to other people or the salesman or your friends or whatever you've read online. So in this video, we're gonna go over some of the features of this bike. I'm gonna try to tell you why those matter to different people and types of riders, and then we'll do the same thing with that, and then we'll tie it all together with helping you decide the types of things that matter to you. So let's get going with this bike right here. So I've talked about the Z900 RS a lot as a really great value bike, and this is sort of that step up from the 650 line of bikes that Kawasaki has. This one has a 4-cylinder engine. Now, interestingly, between these two, the stroke is the same. So the bore is different, but the stroke is the same between these engines, which tells me that this is probably a bored out engine of this. In other words, they share some components. So this one here is the tuned up version of my Z900 RS. This one here is the tuned down version of the Ninja 1000 SX. What that means is horsepower numbers is actually a hair more here, and torque numbers are fairly similar. They're pretty close. Obviously, this is a lighter bike. The other thing that people look at this bike is in comparison to a Ninja 636, which of course, this has similar power numbers, a little bit more horsepower, but more torque, and it's more comfortable. So one thing that's interesting is when you start looking at bikes is if you value a comfortable upright seating position, that's one of the reasons people are really drawn to the Versys. Well, that's the thing about this. Again, almost $10,000 less. If that's really all you're looking for, you could get an accessory windshield on here to take some wind blast away, but we'll talk about wind blast in a second. But at the end of the day, although your legs are tucked up a little differently than on something like Versys where you're like this, it's no less comfortable for a rider of my size. I'm about 6 feet tall. You could be shorter and ride this bike, and that's the other thing. The Versys is a taller bike. This is a shorter bike. So for some people who are just looking for a 4-cylinder, powerful bike with good technology, decent comfort, and a relatively upright seating position, this could already be a better deal than that. But of course, there are reasons to look at that. So let's start taking a look at a couple of the features here on the dash and other things, and then we'll start moving over to the Versys, talk about some features there, and explain that $10,000-ish price gap, a little under $10,000 price gap between the two. All right, so we're gonna take a look at the Z900 dash here, and we are outside, and as you can see there's a lot of reflection, but as you can tell this TFT display, when you throw it on, really fights through that reflection. Now I want to point out one thing: when you're filming with a camera with one eye looking at this, you see a lot of reflection. Your two eyes are good at diffusing that reflection, and you can see it a lot better. So again, this is not filming as clearly as I can see it in real life, but this is a great dash. The first thing I want to point out is you do have cell phone connectivity with this dash in the the Rideology app, excuse me. So we'll do a video on that in the future sometime, but that is something worth pointing out, that you can connect this up to your cell phone, you can get information from there, and various bikes are going to have various levels of information. So again, that's a whole other video, but it is worth pointing out. What I love about this dash is a lot of digital dashes, the tachometer becomes the harder part to see, because the tachometer on a motorcycle is something you look at a glance. It's something you don't need to realize that am I at 5,000, 4,000 RPM. You can see I'm halfway up, I'm near red line, that kind of thing. So what they do is they spread that tachometer all the way across, but there's another trick to this digital dash. You can set it up, and it's set up, preset up from the factory for instance, break-in areas. It'll start flashing when it goes to 4,000 RPM. You can set that flashing to any RPM you want, within about 500 RPM at a time, I believe. But the idea is you can set up to flash at 8,000 RPM, so it'll flash before you get to red line, all kinds of different things. So these digital dashes are more than just a fancy look. They give you extra function, but they're also very clearly laid out. So again, you can change that digital dash and flashing. Now, this bike has a whole bunch of rider modes here. Again, my Z900 RS does have traction control, but it doesn't have the rider mode. So again, huge value here in what you're getting. So first of all, we'll show you the rider modes just really quickly. You have a sport mode right there. We can cycle down here. It does take a second or so. You have to hold the button down, so it goes down to road mode, which again, still gives you that full power, just a little bit less spunky kind of thing. And then we come down to the rain mode, which again brings up your traction control to full. It'll put you in a lower power mode. And then you have the rider mode, which is a really cool customizable mode. And you can kind of see what these drive modes do by looking down here. Power is at F and traction control's at 2. So what that does is essentially it puts the traction control at the maximum level. This is the way it's set up. We'll talk about how you can change it. It sets the traction control at the maximum level, but still gives you full power. So it's like a rain mode with full power. Now what you can do is set the traction control to off or 1 or 2 in there. So you can change this rider mode to fill in, and that's essentially what your driving modes are doing. The sport mode, the road mode, and the rain mode are giving you various levels of power. So again, if you want to calm this bike down, put full traction control on, that's essentially the rain mode. Now you want to add a little less traction control but still have the low power, you can do that. So you can customize 0, which is off, 1 or 2, and full or low power on this to get that sort of different riding character there. And again, this is the same kind of thing you get on the nearly $10,000 more expensive Versys. So there is that option there. So just some cool things in there. The other thing is you have various information down here. If we go back to, we'll just go to the rain mode for now. You can see as we change some of these things down the bottom level there, it's your instant fuel efficiency. It's in kilometers per liter. That's instant and average fuel efficiency. You can change that to liters per 100 kilometers. You can change that to miles per gallon, all kinds of things. So then you got your range, which is your distance to empty approximated based on how you've been driving. You got your average speed in there. You got total time. You got your battery, which is at 12 volts. And again, back to fuel efficiency. You can also change your odometer, trip A, trip B, that kind of thing. So good information in this dash, which again, gives you pretty good value. So now I've moved the camera a little bit to the left of the dash to look at the top of the fork tube, and you can see you have adjustable suspension on this bike. Again, a really great value. If you've moved from our 650cc class of bikes, only the Versys 650 has that adjustable suspension, but you get that here in the Z900. So again, if you were looking at the Versys and wanted adjustable suspension, you have it here. Now the Versys has a major step up, and that explains some of the cost difference. We'll talk about that when we get there, but again, adjustable suspension here, front and rear. So as we talk about the adjustable suspension, I should mention that it is upside down forks here. So that gives you a little bit of an advantage in stiffness overall, in less unsprung weight, but you do have an option to upgrade this bike by going to the SE. I bought the Z900 RS SE. The SE adds radial mount Brembo brakes. It also adds more adjustability in the front suspension, and it gives you an Öhlins shock in the rear. So you can take this bike upgrade that performance, upgrade that braking and suspension performance, as well as getting extra adjustability. So if adjustable suspension is something you want, you can get it in this model without going to the aftermarket. You can just step it one up from this and jump into that kind of thing. The other thing that's cool about the Z900 RS is it has a sound-tuned exhaust. Very few Kawasaki bikes have that, but this is something Kawasaki is starting to do, and it makes it sound great. It's a good sounding bike, so you don't have to put that aftermarket pipe on to get that really great sound. The other thing you get with this bike is you still have a lot of the weight down here, the catalytic converter, those kind of things, all centralized and low, so that makes this bike a really fun handling bike. The little bit bigger engine, sometimes you lose some nimbleness when you go in other manufacturers to those bigger engines, but on something like this, you still have all of that nimbleness that you would want in a bike like this, even though it's a bigger bike than maybe a 650 that you've considered in the past or driven in the past. So a lot of great advantages here for handling. You've got that horizontal backlink rear suspension that's, again, tucked up and low in there. So again, all of this is about centralizing mass and making a great handling bike. Now let's move over to the Versys and talk about some differences on that one. So jumping over to the Versys, again, we've talked about potentially some shared componentry with maybe a similar engine block. You can see some of the value in this bike, right? You've got the bigger windshield, you've got the bags. Those are things that do cost something. You've got a bigger overall seating area, the rack on the back. Those are the obvious things, but it doesn't explain everything about the difference. So let's start going through why this is also a great value, even though it's nearly $10,000 more. This bike at $21,000-ish or so, I have to double check the exact MSRP. This bike is probably $10,000 less than other similar bikes from other major manufacturers, and I think it's got way more value, because when you think about value, you have to talk about the dollar you're spending for the enjoyment you're getting back. Some people look at value for dollar I'm spending for features. Now, features are great, but if you're not going to use them, it doesn't matter. So here's a great example of why that one and this one may have features that you may or may not want. One of the coolest features on this bike is it has these lights down here. When you're cornering, these are 3 individual lights, and the more you lean, each light will come on progressively in order. So if you lean a little bit, just 1, lean a little bit more, there'll be 2, lean a little bit more, there'll be 3, and they're individually aimed. And what that does is it gives you light in the corner towards where you're turning. So if you think about a modern LED light, they have sharp cutoffs. When you lean, the direction you're turning actually gets less light. So this one here lights up that darker space for you. It's a really cool feature, and it's about the IMU, which is a computer component in this bike that allows it to have a whole bunch of things. Now, if you're primarily driving only in the daytime, this has no value for you. So you're paying for it, but that bike doesn't have it, and you know what? You'll never miss it. So those are the kinds of things you should really be honest with yourself. Do I want it because it's cool, or do I want it because it has value to me? So let's talk about this bike a little further, coming a little closer. So let's talk about value when it comes to the brakes out here. This is a better brake. When I talked about the radial mount brakes, this has a different style of braking that is a more stiffer, better braking. Again, these ones aren't the Brembo brakes that you can get on the Z900 or Z900 SE, for instance, but it has that same mounting type style. So again, same type of brakes as on the Ninja 1000 SX, same style of brakes on all the top-end sport bikes, and you still have the upside-down suspension here, which again gives you good stiffness up top, gives you less unsprung weight down here. Ventilated brakes, all that kind of thing. You've got Battle Axe Sport Touring tires here, a little bit more sport tires there. So in theory, these ones should last a little longer and give you all the grip you typically need. Even though those ones are probably technically a hair grippier on something like a racetrack. So in here, you also have KTRC, which is the traction control, and a different ABS. Now, the inertial management unit, the IMU, is a computer in this vehicle. And this one also has adjustable suspension, but one of the things this suspension can do is it's electronically adjustable. So when you hit those brakes and the front end compresses, it's going to know that when you hit those brakes, the front end is going to compress, so it actually stiffens up the shocks to keep you from compressing. What that does is it allows you to have good suspension travel over the bumps. You don't lose suspension travel, so you have better control keeping that wheel in the ground. It really works well. The other thing is coming out of a corner. It can sense what's going on. It can sense not just your braking, but your engine braking, and balance that overall braking pressure front and rear to get you out of a corner better. All of that is electronically based, which makes a bike a little bit easier to drive, potentially, and also better safety features. So when we talk about a lot of those electronic fancy things, the reality is if you drive a bike normally, you're almost never going to click on your ABS brakes if you're driving safely, right? So having advanced ABS brakes doesn't matter as much. Now, if you drive it like this bike, which is a touring bike, you may go out in the rain more often because you're doing more tours than on a casual bike where you can decide, hey, it's raining, I'm staying home. So in a bike like this, having a really advanced ABS system is important because you may have to go back to work on Monday and it's Sunday and your whole day is driving in the rain. That's when ABS really makes a difference, less so than aggressive riding and that kind of thing. So traction control, all those other kinds of things. So when we talk about a touring ride, we have to talk about the value of this. A lot of touring bikes are expensive and a lot of them are very heavy. Although this bike is much heavier than that, something like the Vulcan Vaquero or even the Vulcan Voyager is close to a 900-pound bike. This one is nowhere near that, and although this is a taller bike than that, it gives you a much sportier performing cruiser than a typical cruiser. So again, why do you buy a cruiser bike? Well, you buy it for the style, but you also buy it for comfort. This has all the comfort you need to go all day long, and gives you more sporting capability and gives you great wind protection. And then the Versys does some weird things with styling. Like for instance, I can stick my entire hand through the windshield here. The reason the windshield is opened up like that is because it takes away the negative pressure here. So a lot of time, if you think about your typical SUV, right, the wind comes over the body and the air whips around and your back window is always dirty. Well, that's because it's pushing that dirt back towards it. So what you have with some style windshields is it pulls you in, it can create some buffeting. What this open panel does here maybe doesn't look as cool as a cruiser style, but it allows you to have that wind come through so it doesn't create that negative pressure and it makes it less tiring to ride. The other thing that's pretty cool, you've got wind protection, rain protection, gravel protection, all kinds of, if a truck throws up a stone that could break a windshield on a car, trust me, if it hits your knuckles, it's gonna hurt as well. So you've got that protection here. These are also great for cold weather riding. They keep the wind off your hands for cold weather, and then you also have heated grips. Now you can add heated grips to something like that, but these kinds of covers you have to go to the aftermarket, whereas here it comes standard. So it's not just about having hand grips and heated grips, it's about, it allows you to extend your riding season. So again, if you buy a bike that you can only ride in warm weather, then you have to decide, is it worth it for me to spend a little bit more to gain an extra month, several weeks on either end of the season, especially here in Canada, that gives you extra wind protection. So again, value is an interesting thing. Now, that suspension here that we talked about is really important. We should also talk about the luggage. If you want to go on a long trip, this luggage is really good. It's keyed to the ignition key. What's cool is you can open it with the key. If you have the key in your hand or the key in the ignition, you know these are locked. So same thing when you walk away from the bike. If you have the key with you, you know these are locked. These are super handy. Having lockable, secure, aerodynamic storage that can fit a full face helmet and all the gear you need is really cool. You want to take them off the bike, same thing. Use the ignition key, they come right off and you've got a cleaner looking bike. You've still got the rack back here, you have a huge back seat. So again, value matters there as well. A big, comfortable rear seat. If you are taking two people, that's not a bike that people are going to want to ride for a long time on the back. This one is, and that can have value too as well. So you have to decide, am I taking someone around the block? Am I taking someone out for half an hour, that kind of thing? Or am I taking someone on a long tour, taking them regularly, that kind of thing? Both the seating position of a square upright position and the larger seat are going to be more comfortable for a passenger. And those are things you really have to weigh. If you're taking a passenger and you buy that bike, it's not going to be the best bike for taking a passenger. Just because you can doesn't mean that person's going to want to, or that you're going to feel safe riding with that passenger on the back. So something to keep in mind there. Now let's pull it all together a little bit. All right, I lied. I can't pull it together until I at least show you the dash on this one. So this one's interesting. This is the only Kawasaki dash like this. Now, I'm not sure if this is a TFT display, but it looks very similar. It films a little bit different. If I was to zoom in here, it does have a little different look there. Now, you do have some of your adjustable suspension stuff right there, so we can show you that by adjusting the preload, and it's pretty cool here. If I just tap it down here for a second, you can see there's a rider with luggage, and then I can tap it down again, and you can adjust it up, and a rider or two riders with luggage. So you have preload settings that can be adjusted electronically. Now let's be honest, if you don't take some tools with you on certain bikes, you're not adjusting your preload ever. Here you can adjust it right up any way you want and bring it back down electronically. So that electric suspension is kind of cool. Most of this dash is similar. You can see right now I have it on lean angle. The max is 24 to the left and 27 to the right. There's a whole bunch of different things, but again, that's that IMU. That's a piece of the bike that can sense the lean, the twist, all kinds of different things of the bike, and you can get some displays in there. So most of this dash is very similar to the other one, but you do have a little advantage, and then you have a traditional tachometer. Let's just quickly show you the controls well, and then we'll tie everything together. So again, when we talk value, we can talk features, but we have to decide if these features are good for you. So we mentioned the heated grips that are here on this bike. Also cruise control. Now cruise control is a feature that is really helpful on a long tour kind of bike, basically because it allows you to rest your hand. Now, some people are going to use cruise control, some people aren't on a bike. So again, paying for this if you're not going to use it doesn't give you extra value. However, if you're on a very long tour and you want something to just relax your right hand, you do have that electronic cruise control here, which is again better than something like a throttle lock, which allows you to take your hand off. This allows you to set a speed and hold a speed, and it's very easy to do, just very automotive style. The other thing I should point out is you do have adjustable clutch lever and brake lever on both of these bikes, and that is one of those things that you usually set and forget, right? You can set that lever out or in to where you want. Now, the one difference I will say is the benefit of having something like this is because it moves the lever in and out, it kind of changes the feel of where that engagement point is on how far you let your clutch in and out. So it is something where once you drive the bike for a little while, you feel like, hey, maybe that engagement point isn't where I want to. You can move this lever in or out a little bit and sort of change the feel of where that engagement point is, which can be something that adds value to you or not. You can sort of decide that for yourself. All right, so let's tie this all together when we talk about value. There are Versys 1000 riders that would be better off with this bike. And I know that kind of blows your mind, but let's walk it through a little bit slower. If you are someone who wants to move to a bigger, more torquey, more powerful engine than something like a twin cylinder 650 or something like that, you want an upright, comfortable seating position, and you want to take some luggage, this still might be the right bike for you. It does sit more upright, it has that engine, it has great power, and luggage is the kind of thing where you can get soft luggage, you can get all kinds of tail bags, tank bags, you can even get side mount bags here in the aftermarket or sometimes from Kawasaki as well, that allow you to get everything you want in this bike, including that adjustable suspension, the digital dash, the rider modes, those kinds of things. So you could have everything you want in this bike and save significant money over that bike. However, this bike is in no way that bike. So that's the kind of thing. And I'll give you an example with my own life. I was looking at the Ninja 1000 SX. I had my heart set on that. As I started looking at it, I really kept walking by the Z900 RS SE that I really liked. And every time I walked by that bike, I just liked it. And you have to buy the bike that you like. But what did I want the Ninja 1000 for? I wanted those hard bags just like on the Versys 1000. The reality is what I really wanted is something that was very comfortable, but still sporty, fun, with great brakes and good power. That's what the Ninja 1000 is, but that's also what my Z900 RS SE is. It's comfortable, has great power, has great brakes, has great handling, and really that's all I wanted, and I saved money in insurance. Now, the Ninja is a better value bike. The Ninja has more things, like it has the Kawasaki, that IMU unit that we talked about that can sense all those kinds of things, but in reality, for my type of riding, that's not something that adds enjoyment or value for me. And that's the kind of thing you have to really be honest about when you're talking about a value in a bike. So if you are going to be doing longer tours and need all the luggage and need lockable storage, of course this is a better value. But you can decide if you can decide for yourself what matters to you, you may find that looking across a range of bikes gives you everything you need. In my case, the only thing the Z900 RS SE didn't have was luggage capacity. I solved that with some soft luggage in the aftermarket. And again, I had to be honest with myself. I was buying the bike because I had visions of doing grand tours, but I have a couple kids and responsibilities and other things, and I might do one big tour a year. Most of the time, I want to get on it, ride around town, ride to work, ride out of town, do that kind of thing, and my bike is perfect for me. So the key is to be honest with yourself about what really matters for you. And if you're saving for a bike like this, and a bike like this will do, you may be able to get this bike now. However, there's a lot of reasons to move to a bike like this. This may be my next bike because at some point my kids are going to grow up, my responsibilities are going to change, and I do want to go on longer tours more often. And this is what I have my eye on. So I hope that helps. If you have questions about value, about motorcycles, about anything in the Kawasaki lineup, I have complete access here at Jim Gilbert's Wheels and Deals to give you all the video information that you could need. So let me know in the comments if there's something that you want covered in that Kawasaki lineup, and I'll come back to you with more videos. I want to thank Jim Gilbert for giving me complete access. And remember, if you want to see these bikes, this is the #1 volume Kawasaki dealer in the country with a massive showroom. You can come in here, check them out for yourself. Jim Gilbert's Power Sports here in Fredericton, New Brunswick. Thanks everybody for watching.